In the second and last part of this module, I'd like to discuss SVG animations. One important thing to note here is that SVG animations are not supported at the time of the creation of this course in Internet Explorer, so be cautious when you are using them. When looking at SVG animations, we basically have the choice to either add them entirely declaratively or using JavaScript. Declarative means that we are creating them entirely using SVG code. That is the solution we are going to use in the remainder of this module. As mentioned, SVG animations are entirely defined in markup. That means indeed that the developer basically defines the instructions for the animations, and it's the browser who is doing the actual animation. So, when we are creating a declarative animation, we are using only SVG to do this. When we think of an animation, what elements do we need? An animation runs for a certain amount of time, so in the SVG animation, we definitely need to include how long the animation will take. Also, in the animation definition, we need to include which element we want to take part in the animation. And based on this information, all defined in SVG, the browser can render the animation. I think it's quite logical that time is important in an animation. An animation is basically the change of a value of an element over time. An animation needs a begin and an end to know when the animation should start and when it should stop executing. Typically, we specify an animation in the form of start the animation 10 seconds after loading the page or start the animation when another animation has finished. The begin and end in an animation can be set to just a number, which defaults to seconds. If needed, we can also use numbers including hours, minutes, seconds, and even milliseconds. So 0330 would mean 3 minutes and 30 seconds. And note that it's also possible to specify the duration of an animation using the dur property of the animation. Only defining how long an animation would run is not enough. We also need to trigger the actual animation start. And this can be done using a trigger to fire the execution of the animation. There are different types of triggers included in SVG. For example, an animation can start when another animation starts or ends. Also, it's possible to start an animation from code, so on a button click or on a key press. And if you don't specify anything, the SVG animation will start automatically on load of the SVG document. Now, SVG comes with a number of possible animation types. We'll take a look at some of these and then apply them in our site. The simplest form of animations is the set, which simply switches a property from value A to B. Other animation types include animate, animate color, animate transform, and animate motion. Let's take a look at these in a bit more detail. So as said, the set animation simply switches the value of a property at some point. So it's not really an animation, it is just switching a value. There's no transition or something else possible here. So here in the sample, we see a circle and then a set animation inside of a circle. This animation simply changes the value of the fill attribute to orange after 1 second. The second sample here uses again a circle, but now uses an animate instead of the set animation. The value of the center point in the x direction will now change from 30 to 100 at load of the SVG block over a time span of 10 seconds. That is the duration. The fill property is set to freeze, which means that it keeps the end value of the animation after the animation has finished. We can also move elements around using the animate motion animation. In the sample you see here, we have a rectangle and we've added the animate motion. The target position is set to 150 in the X and 50 in the Y direction. The animation starts on click and will take 3 seconds. In this last sample here, we are using the animate transform animation on a rectangle, which will basically transform the element. In this case, it will perform a rotation. Over a time span of 10 seconds, the rectangle will rotate over an angle of 90 degrees. Let us now go back to the sample and add an animation in our graph. In the very last demo of this course, we are going to work with SVG animations. Remember that in the previous demo, there was actually one bar of the bar chart missing. Well, we're gonna make it appear now using an animation. The one I'm talking about is actually in the SVG, but it has a height of 0 and also it doesn't have a fill applied on it. I'm gonna give this one a gradient. If you remember from the slides, gradients have to be created in the devs block. So I'm going to start by creating a devs block, so a definitions block, and inside of it, I'm going to add a gradient. In this case, I'm opting for a linear gradient. And from the attributes here, we can see that this gradient is going to go from the bottom to the top. Then for the gradient, I'm also defining a number of color stops. This is the color at the starting position of the gradient, and this is the one at the end position of the gradient. The next thing I'm going to do is apply this gradient onto that rectangle. So I'm going to use the fill and I'm going to set it to URL, passing in the ID of the gradient within the definitions block, and that was simply gradient1. Now it still doesn't have a height. I'm going to use an animation for this. So I'm going to say that I'm adding an animate here, and the attribute that I want to apply my animation on is indeed the height. And the value needs to go from its current value to a value of the sales number for that month, which is 689. I'm also going to specify the fill, and I'm going to set it to freeze, which means that the end value remains visible. So it's going to stay at 689. Finally, I need to specify how long the animation should take, and let's put that to 5 seconds, for example. If we now run this in Internet Explorer, we're not going to see anything happening because at this point, Internet Explorer does not have support for SVG animations, so be careful. I'm going to use Google Chrome instead. And so this is now the result in Chrome. Let me zoom out a little bit. If we refresh the page, on load, the animation starts and goes from yellow to red using that gradient. With this last demo, we have finished this chapter and actually also the course. Let's go over what we have learned in this module. SVG is a welcome addition to the HTML5 platform, making it capable of also creating scalable vector graphics. With many high-resolution devices appearing every day, this is something that is highly required. And SVG animations also extend the features, making it possible to go beyond static graphics being created. And this concludes this practical HTML5 course as well. Let me be the first to congratulate you on completing this course. It has been a long ride, but I'm confident that you have learned a lot of useful things. Please make sure to download also the source code as well, since it will help you with one of the primary goals of this course, capturing the big picture of how all HTML5 features can work together. I want to conclude by thanking you for watching this Pluralsight course, and please contact me with any questions you may have or leave a rating for this course on the site. Thanks for watching. Bye bye for now.